Fans realized something was off when Aventur, the wife of Pastor John Gray, recently turned to social media with her eyes full of grief and her voice shaking. Everyone was stunned by what she disclosed next. As new information about John Gay's history came to light, Aventur finally broke down after years of standing up for her husband in issue after controversy. Information that could alter our understanding of their marriage, their ministry, and his reputation as a godly guy. It's more than rumors this time. It's excruciatingly honest, deeper, and more intimate. You're going to hear what may be the most poignant discovery of Pastor John Gay's life. So pay close attention. Pastor John Gray has been one of the most talked about people in the contemporary church world for a long time. Renowned for his stirring sermons, affable demeanor, and he gained notoriety on television for his ability to relate faith to hardships in everyday life. But there's always another tale going on in the background, behind the ministry, the cameras, and the celebrity ties. A tale of suffering, repentance, and second chances. Currently, John Gay's name is trending once more, but this time, his sermons and messages of hope aren't the main focus. It's on his wife, Aventur Gray, who just went public as disturbing new information about John's history started to come to light. Both believers and detractors have shown sympathy, indignation, and discussion in response to her unfiltered emotion. There's a rising sense that this time things are different. People are questioning what really happened. Why did these past details resurface now? And how is this affecting their marriage and ministry? May differ. That something more profound than before is indicated by Aventur's emotional reaction. We're going into great detail about this most recent development in this video. We will examine the reality, the responses, and the lessons that follow, starting with the hidden facets of John Gay's previous scandals and ending with Aventur's emotional disclosure. The connections between this story and past scandals, instances of reconciliation, and the Grays' handling of public scrutiny in the name of forgiveness and religion will astound you. This is where things start to get interesting, though, because John Gray's past is not the only thing that is called into question by the recently released material. Under the strain of public ministry, it calls into question everything we believe to be true about what it means to recover, forgive, and rebuild. So, have a seat, because we're going to reveal the true tale of Aventur Gay's tragic incident and the reasons it's striking a profound chord both inside and outside of the gospel community. John Gray was hailed as one of the most talented communicators of his time before the world knew him as the divisive pastor who made headlines for all the wrong reasons. He had modest beginnings, preaching in tiny congregations and relating to people by passion, humor, and openness. He was no ordinary preacher. He could be identified with. Unlike most church leaders, he talked about real challenges. Joining Houston, Texas's Lakewood Church, led by Pastor Joel Austin, was John Gray's turning point. He was an associate pastor there, and his fiery sermons and grounded message captivated crowds. He frequently discussed brokenness, grace, and God's capacity to save even the most sinful individuals. His honesty and charisma made him a younger Christians who felt cut off from established church culture loved him. Eventually, television networks noticed. Jay got his own show on the Oprah Winfrey Network called The Book of John Gray because of his storytelling skills and contagious charisma. The show depicted him as a guy juggling fame and faith by following his life as a father, husband, and pastor. It presented him as the authentic pastor, the one who acknowledged his imperfections but had a strong love for God. The audiences adored it. However, fissures were starting to appear behind the scenes. Rumors circulated about inappropriate communications and emotional ties with women outside of his marriage. Most initially wrote them off as inflated rumors. Since John Gray was well known for being candid about his personal difficulties, many people believed that openness equated to responsibility. However, for those who are listening carefully, warning signals were present. Confessions about temptation, brokenness, and the need for forgiveness were common in his sermons. He would lecture about the value of marriage and the need for men to uphold their moral character. Some others saw those sermons as windows into a more profound internal conflict between his humanity and his calling. The first significant controversy quickly surfaced. When rumors circulated that John Gray had cheated on his wife, Aventur, social media erupted. The tale became more convoluted because of how widely known it became. In his sermons, John himself addressed the issue, acknowledging his errors while refuting some assertions. By stating that even pastors are fallible and require God's grace, he presented it as a lesson in redemption. Aventur was by his side the entire time. She publicly defended her husband, claiming it was a spiritual assault intended to ruin their ministry and marriage. While some questioned how much she had to undergo behind closed doors, many praised her loyalty. Her steadfast support at that point became a defining characteristic of her public persona. However, other controversies surfaced over time. The cycle appeared to repeat itself each time. Public forgiveness, tears, apologies, and accusations. John kept preaching about grace and redemption throughout it all, while Aventur remained standing next to him. However, some started to question how often forgiveness could mend the same injury. This backstory lays the groundwork for Aventur's eventual emotional collapse. Because although the world witnessed a couple that constantly getting back together, few people are aware of the emotional toll that a woman standing in the spotlight next to her spouse could suffer after years of constant public humiliation. This is the point at which things become even more intricate, because the most recent disclosure did more than simply rekindle old scars. Even Aventur might not have been ready for the new realities it revealed. It wasn't just another rehashed tale about an old incident when the most recent round of news about Pastor John Gray appeared on social media. This time, new facts came to light that caused additional suffering to a situation that many people thought had already been handled. These new information were more painful than ever for Aventur Gray, the wife who had supported her husband through church gossip, social media scrutiny, and public humiliation. There were communications and exchanges from John's past that had never been made public, according to a number of internet reports and communications that were leaked. These episodes weren't entirely new. Rather, they were fragments of a history that filled in the voids left by earlier scandals. Voice notes that some say reveal manipulation masquerading as ministry discussion, talks that alluded to emotional infidelity, and photographs that were never completely confirmed but were sufficient to rekindle an old flame. The timing of this revelation was almost as devastating as the information that came to light. The Grays had been trying to restore their reputation for months. John had resumed his preaching, discussing grace, redemption, and the price of failure in an honest manner. He had hosted integrity-related conferences for men, posted about family holidays, and paid heartfelt homage to his wife. The pair appeared to have finally moved past the most difficult period of their marriage to the outside world. However, the illusion of quiet was destroyed when these old data were discovered and started to circulate once more. When people started sharing screenshots and emerging videos, the internet didn't forget. The damage could not be contained. Social internet was inundated with comments. Some supporters supported him by citing verses that speak about second chances and forgiveness. Others were much less forgiving, accusing John of exploiting his faith for publicity and raising concerns about the number of times forgiveness should be given for the same transgression. When Aventur herself made an Instagram live appearance, it was the most devastating moment. She trembled as she tried not to cry, but her tone betrayed the sorrow she was feeling. She talked about perseverance, treachery, and the pressures of being a public wife of a preacher. Even if you love God, you may still be broken. Thousands of women who had been in her position, standing next to someone they loved while silently carrying their own scars, found solace in her statement. You can pray every day and still feel like your heart is being torn apart. The statement section was overflowing with assistance. She was referred to as transparent, strong, and courageous. However, there was another reality hidden beneath the sympathy. Her cries made it clear that the mending that many believed had already occurred may not have actually occurred. The genuineness of her feelings was what really astounded the audience. This was not a public relations campaign nor a practiced church address. It was the unadulterated agony of someone who had pushed herself to the limit. Even when the world turned against John, Aventur had stood up for him for years. She had encouraged women to fight for their marriages and talked about forgiveness and reconciliation. Her tears, however, conveyed a different message at that precise moment. A tale of weariness, disillusionment, and a woman who at last acknowledging the price she had paid for the past. John Gray, meanwhile, said very nothing. Instead of immediately issuing a statement, he shared scriptures and succinct thoughts on grace. That quiet spoke a lot to some. Was he sorry? Was he attempting to spare his wife further humiliation? Or was he just, like in the past, waiting for the storm to pass? One thing was certain, regardless of his goals. Everyone, even their fans, was forced to face the unsettling reality of what happens when ministry, marriage, and celebrity collided when these revelations came to light again. A pastor who spoke about redemption but was unable to overcome his past was seen by the world. Additionally, they witnessed a wife who had given her all, including love, fidelity, and faith, only to have the man she thought had changed bring her to tears once more. The plot takes an even more unexpected turn at this point, though, because something significant started to occur in the middle of the heartache and public humiliation. The same individuals who had previously condemned the Grays started to utilize their narrative as a prism through which to view their own suffering, strained bonds, and the true price of forgiveness. Social media users' reactions to the news of Aventur Gray's emotional collapse were swift, strong, and sharply split. Videos from her emotional live stream were reposted on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok in a matter of hours. Some people silently observed, taking in the intensity of her suffering. Other people's views were far more strongly held. Some defended her, some criticized her, and many brought up every issue that had ever involved her husband, Pastor John Gray. The comment sections soon became battlegrounds. Those that sympathized with Aventur were on one side. They commended her sensitivity for speaking out in public and her strength for supporting her spouse through several storms. These admirers referred to her as the embodiment of grace, a lady who demonstrated forgiveness even in the face of societal demands for vengeance. Scripture passages emphasizing God's mercy and the notion that healing is a journey rather than a single event were shared by them. The detractors, however, who came from both inside and outside the church, asked how much longer she could put up with being publicly humiliated in the name of grace. According to some, she is defending her reputation more than her peace. Others contended that, particularly for women in ministry, being silent for an extended period of time in a toxic environment sent the incorrect message. They claimed that her loyalty had turned into a prison. Aventur's breakdown wasn't only a cry for assistance to many of these critics. It was a woman's realization that love can be too expensive at times. The church community, pastors, ministers, and believers then joined in, each contributing their unique viewpoint to the conversation. Several prominent leaders hurried to defend the Grays, claiming that they were being attacked spiritually. They preached that the enemy works tirelessly to destroy a relationship anytime God raises them for kingdom activity. Others, however, were much harsher, claiming that ongoing crises in leadership are a sign of a lack of genuine accountability and repentance. Grace doesn't mean we ignore the truth. You can't preach deliverance and keep running from discipline, read a pastor's widely shared message, which received thousands of reactions. But for many viewers, something about this time felt different. There was a weariness in the public tone, a sense that people were tired of watching cycles of scandal, apology, and forgiveness play out over and over again among high-profile pastors. It touched a nerve in the faith community, forcing believers to face a question that many have avoided for years. How far should grace go when it comes to public figures who continue to fall into the same patterns? The discussion wasn't just limited to the church. Entertainment and gossip outlets picked up the story, framing it as another celebrity pastor scandal. Memes, reaction videos, and commentary pieces flooded the internet, mixing serious dialogue with sensational headlines. Whether or not people agreed with her decision to remain by John's side, they couldn't deny the sincerity in her voice. For a moment, she wasn't a pastor's wife or a public figure. She was a woman whose heart had been broken in front of the world repeatedly, and this time she couldn't hide it anymore. Even within their own church community, reactions were mixed. Is this the price of fame in ministry? Is the pressure to maintain an image forcing pastors to compromise behind closed doors? And most importantly, is the church failing its own leaders by elevating charisma over character? Others discreetly withdrew from the congregation, declining to participate or attend services until the situation calmed down. Throughout it all, John Gray stayed mostly silent, occasionally posting messages about faith, endurance, and pain, along with a black and white photo of himself reflecting deeply. The comments on that post showed how divided people were, with half calling for honesty and the other half offering encouragement. However, beneath the controversy and discussion, something more profound was taking place. As the emotional storm continued to unfold online, it became clear that Aventur Gray's breakdown wasn't just another moment of public vulnerability. It was a turning point. For years, she had carried the weight of standing beside a husband whose ministry had been tested by scandal after scandal. She had been the silent strength in the background, the faithful partner who smiled through sermons and tears. It demonstrated how easy it is to preach grace, but how difficult it is to actually live it out when the person in question is someone we admired or someone who let us down. When Aventur spoke through tears, it wasn't a prepared defense or a polished sermon. Rather, it was a woman at her breaking point, and her voice trembled as she spoke about forgiveness and the kind of pain that comes from trying to heal wounds that keep reopening, not just from betrayal. "You can love somebody and still have to learn how to love yourself again," she said. Aventur started talking more candidly about the emotional toll of living under constant scrutiny, acknowledging that being a pastor's wife isn't always glamorous. It's lonely, exhausting, and sometimes deeply unfair. People expect you to be strong all the time. Those words struck a deeper chord than any headline because they exposed a truth that so many women, especially those in ministry, have been forced to hide behind church walls. "They expect you to smile through your heartbreak and pray through your tears," she said. "But sometimes, in order for you to rebuild, God must allow you to break." And that's what began to happen. Slowly, Aventur started to reclaim her own narrative. She posted less about being Pastor John Gray's wife and more about being Aventur. She started speaking directly to women who felt trapped in toxic cycles of emotional pain, reminding them that forgiveness doesn't mean losing yourself in the process. Her honesty struck a chord far beyond her church circle. It reached women across the world who had watched her story unfold and finally saw themselves reflected in her transparency. In one of her most powerful posts, Aventur wrote, "Healing isn't about pretending it didn't happen. It's about deciding to move past what went wrong. You." Tens of thousands of people liked and shared that one sentence, which was about survival, faith, and finding meaning beyond suffering rather than celebrity. As for John Gray's role in her recovery, it was unclear. Some reports claimed he was in counseling, working to address old wounds and patterns that had led to his mistakes, while others said he was concentrating on ministry and trying to rebuild trust in a private setting. Whatever was going on behind the scenes, one thing was certain. Aventur was no longer carrying his burden alone, and she was learning to set boundaries while maintaining her faith. Many in the faith community started to view her as a symbol of tenacity, not because she stayed, but because she continued to find new strength to stand. As her healing journey progressed, something extraordinary happened. Rather than avoiding her pain, Aventur began using it to help others heal. She started giving talks at women's conferences, hosting intimate talks about spiritual restoration and resilience, and she told women, "You don't have to be perfect to be powerful." Her story compelled the church to acknowledge that forgiveness isn't always synonymous with silence and that sometimes healing requires space, honesty, and confrontation with hard truths. To demonstrate your strength, you don't need to hide your tears. Your broken bits can still be used by God to create something lovely. Her message struck a chord because it focused on process rather than perfection. The world may never forget his past, but what he does from this point on will determine how the story unfolds. Today, Aventur's journey continues to inspire. She's still standing, still believing, and still fighting for peace. Time will tell whether she and Jay's marriage will fully recover. But one thing is certain. This chapter has changed her forever. She's no longer just the woman behind the pastor. She's a voice for everyone who has ever loved deeply, been deeply hurt, and yet chosen to rise. The world may never forget his past, but what he does from this point on will determine how the story unfolds. Ends. Because ultimately, this is not just a story about scandal. It's a story about redemption, accountability, and the fact that healing is messy, painful, and necessary. It's about how love can endure truth. And it's about how faith can remain strong after the spotlight has passed. As the gospel community watches this unfold, one message keeps coming up in every part of the story. Forgiveness transforms the future, but it doesn't erase the past. Perhaps, just perhaps that's what Aventur was trying to remind us of all along.